latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We discussed this a bit earlier, but I want our next guest to hear it, so he is assured that I am not misrepresenting the words of noted criminologist and View co-host Sunny Hostin. They had Arnold Schwarzenegger on to talk, among other things, about immigration. And here's what Schwarzenegger, an immigrant himself, you may know, had to say about how people coming to this country should behave.
Of the great kind of history that we have with immigrants in America. But the key thing also is at the same time that we got to do things legal. That is the important thing, you know. So you got to do things legal. And those people that are doing illegal things in America and that are foreigners, they are not smart. Because when you come to America, you're a guest. And you have to behave like a guest. Like when I go to someone's house and I'm a guest, then I will do everything I can to keep things clean and to make my bed and to do everything that is the right thing to do rather than committing a crime or being abusive or something like that. So that doesn't really work in this country. So I think the important thing is when you become an immigrant to think about, okay, I go to America because I want to use America for the great opportunities that America has in education, in jobs, creating a family, all of those kind of things. Then you have to think about, okay, if I get all of those things from America, then I have to give something back. You have a responsibility as an immigrant to give back to America and to pay back to America and to go and do something for your community for no money whatsoever. Give something back to after-school programs, Special Olympics, or whatever it is. Make this country a better place.
By the way, just a point of order, Arnold may not be familiar, but not making your bed is not a crime.
Well, he just means, tidy up. I know.
I think I know what he means. Yeah.
Got to keep it clean. And I agree with them. Like, don't come here and expect handouts, which, I guess people got the word that we're handing them everything they need, clothes, phone, healthcare. But also respect our laws and be proud that you're an American, that you're in America, that we allowed you in.
Don't come here expecting you're going to be able to do a terrible rom-com with Danny DeVito. Don't expect that. It may happen.
It may.
You're not entitled to it.
Don't expect to be governor of California.
And so after that, come here and behave like a guest, he had to get some view-splaining from Whoopi and Sunny.
Arnold, don't forget, there's 90% of the people who come here are trying to do the right thing.
They're less likely to commit crimes.
And a lot of what's happening right now is people are getting snatched who shouldn't be snatched out of the country, people who have visas, people who have all those things. So we want all the right people. We don't want people who are doing bad stuff.
But they are less likely, immigrants are much less likely to commit crimes in this country than actually American-born citizens. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that Governor Newsom did not ask for the National Guard to come to, the federal government to come to California. There are 9,000 local law enforcement officers in California. Did he really?
Okay, so there it is. That's what I wanted John Lott to hear, the reviews of
their line of argument.
Statisticians and criminologists on The View. John Lott is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. He's former senior advisor for research and stats at the Justice Department's Office of Legal Policy, author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I guess there's really nothing left for me to say after they've explained the situation there.
Well, I mean, you maybe just if you want to prove their work or dispute it, as a colleague. Are Sunny and Whoopi right?
Well, I mean, it'd be nice if they were, but look. When she talks about immigrant crime, the problem is that those numbers mix together crimes by both legal and illegal immigrants. legal immigrants do tend to commit crime at very low rates, but illegals tend to commit crime at fairly high rates. And even they mentioned the 10% number. If right before the election last year, the Biden administration came out and they said that of the 7.4 million so-called non-detained individuals, about 662,000, or almost 10%, had criminal records. But there are many problems with that. One is not all their home countries would provide information on that. Countries like Venezuela, for example. So you have a lot of missing information there about criminal backgrounds. The other thing is that almost all of those individuals were individuals who voluntarily turned themselves in at the border. Those aren't the ones that you should be most concerned about, even though obviously it's something well over 10% of those had criminal records in their home countries. What you need to worry about are so-called gotaways. There were like over 2 million of those during the Biden administration, people that we saw coming across the border and didn't catch. And then we have millions more that we didn't even see coming across the border, because 76% of the Border Patrol agents who would normally be guarding the border were pulled off of that duty, and instead were having to process the illegals who had voluntarily turned themselves in at the border. And also, about a third of the passive monitoring equipment along the border was broken and wasn't being fixed by the Biden administration. It's the people who were willing to turn, not accept the $250,000 or $2,500 free prepaid credit cards, or the food and the housing and the medical care that you all were just mentioning a minute ago, or the trips, flights to places in the country that they wound up going to. The ones who would pay the extra money to avoid having to go and deal with the processing there, who are the most concerned. So,
well,
even the 10% is a big underestimate of the crime number.
And it seems to me that even if you take that 10%, 10% of, let's say, 2 million gotaways, let's say it's 10%. Well, 10% of 2 million gotaways is 200,000 people. We were talking about this earlier in the program and yesterday. Tom Homan estimates that of the 60,000 migrants in this country illegally in Chicago, 2,000 are known criminals. Well, that's only 3%, but is 2,000 known criminals, foreign nationals roaming around Chicago? Is that a big problem? Sure, it's a big problem. I mean, so whatever the percentages are, or whatever they want to suggest they are, once you look at it in the context of the raw numbers we're talking about, you realize just how much a public safety threat is posed by that.
Right. And as we say, taking the numbers, even though those are already an underestimate for those who voluntarily turn themselves in, is going to be way lower than the ones who, the gotaways, are the ones that we never saw coming across the border. So, you're talking about real problems that are there. And there's no reason why any of these criminals should be let into the country, whether they come through voluntarily or not.
But how did we know 15,000 were charged with murder, not accused of it?
Right.
Have been another 15,000 or 22,000 were sexual predators. How in the HE double hockey sticks did we allow that to happen? I mean, if they went through the border, they were processed, and they knew this guy is a sexual predator. Is he one of the gotaways, or how did they know that information? That's so mind-boggling.
Right. Yeah. So there were 13,000, almost 14,000 who had been convicted of murder. Another almost 2,000 who had been charged with murder in their home country, but had gotten into the United States. So what happened was, under Trump, when we had the Remain in Mexico policy, the Customs Service would go and do the criminal background checks on the individuals and would contact their home countries. Under the Biden administration, where they ended that, they ended up having ICE go and do the checks. But the thing is, ICE did not have the authority, nor did they ask for it, to go and contact the home countries for these individuals. The information that we have on their criminal backgrounds on their home countries was only collected after they had been already released into the country.
Something else that you wrote about recently is the decline in the murder rate at the national level, and we're seeing it in big cities correspondingly. Of course, big city mayors like Brandon Johnson here in Chicago are saying it's because they know what to do and they're doing it, and it's proving up in terms of results, things like violence interrupters and I don't know what else he says he's doing, but it's local policies here in Chicago and other big cities that are making the difference. The murder rate's definitely going down, as you wrote in the Federalist. We're tracking for the lowest murder rate on record nationally. To what do we attribute this?
Well, I think we attribute it to multiple things. I mean, just as a contrast, during the Biden administration, when we had this record influx of illegals coming into the country, we saw during at least the first 3 years of the Biden administration that we have complete data for, the largest percentage increase in overall violent crime over any 3-year period that we've ever seen since they started collecting the data. It's more than twice as large as the largest previous increase in violent crime. It was a 55% increase over that time. Now we're seeing this large drop that's occurring in murders anyway during the first 5 months of the year. And, you know, the question is why? And there are multiple reasons. I think things like the federal government moving FBI agents to places where there's actually crimes occurring. They had almost a third of the agents had been stationed in the D.C. area, even though obviously not a third of the nation's crime was located there. You've had the federal government get out of trying to force DEI policies, hiring and promotion things on police and fire departments across the country. You've had changes in moving away from Soros prosecutors in many areas like Los Angeles and San Francisco. So those all matter. But the other thing that I think matters is the deportations, and it matters in two ways. One is, obviously, we've deported and focused on deporting criminals who've been committing crimes. But the other thing is there's a lot of evidence that when you're doing that, one way to make sure you're not going to be deported, or at least lower the odds, is not to be committing crimes right now. You may have been committing crimes last year, but you're less likely to be on the police radar if you're not committing a crime right now. And if you get arrested, there's a good chance these days that ICE will be there to go and make sure you're deported out of the country. And we see this in many areas, not just in terms of crime data, that illegals are lying low. You see it in terms of things like the employment data. During the Biden administration, 5.4 million, or most of the jobs that were created, were for non-native born Americans. We don't know how many of those were illegals, but presumably a significant number of them were. Just during the first 4 months of the Trump administration, rather than this 5.4 million increase, we've actually seen well over 700,000 drop in the number of jobs for non-native born Americans. And you know, given that the IRS has been working now with the Trump administration to go and identify illegals who are working in the United States, you know, if you drop out of the labor force, you lower your chances of being deported. So, you know, I think, and there's other evidence too that these guys, the fact that they can be deported is causing them to change their behavior, not just in terms of crime.
Not to mention 1 million reportedly have self-deported. Well,
there's a problem with that, and
okay. That's the report.
700,000 of that is this drop in jobs. They're just assuming that all of those are illegals, and they're assuming all of those, if they stop working, are self-deporting, and neither of those are true.
So that's an overstatement. Yeah, that number. Okay. I wanted to ask you.
Use the app to get out.
Wanted to ask you the gun question, or the question about the AR-15 gun case. So the Seventh Circuit is taking up the challenge to Illinois' law banning AR-15 sport rifles, and the Department of Justice filed an amicus brief on behalf of the party that is moving to have the ban on AR-15s in Illinois declared unconstitutional. What do you expect to see in that case, and given Supreme Court precedent of recent vintage? I mean, this Illinois law is going to be deemed unconstitutional. If the Seventh Circuit doesn't do it, the Supreme Court will, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. The Justice Department brief heavily cites the district court judge who wrote an excellent opinion striking down the law there. The thing is, you have a panel on the Seventh Circuit, including Frank Easterbrook, who I knew well when I was at the University of Chicago, who are going to hear this case again. Now, there's one difference. Frank will definitely rule that the law is constitutional, given his past record. The other judge who's still on the panel will rule that it is unconstitutional again. Before Diane Woods, who had ruled that it was constitutional, she has retired. And so the outcome on the Seventh Circuit is going to depend upon who replaces her. Okay. But I agree with you that, look, I mean, it's pretty clear that this is a gun in common use, that the types of gymnastics that they went through to begin with on the case when it went to the appeals court, circuit court, it will not be upheld by the Supreme Court.
John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, and author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Seth Leibson for Town Hall